I was working the front desk at a Sydney hostel when this American family walked in, all jet-lagged and confused. The dad looked at me and said, "We need directions to the koala sanctuary." I told him it was about 40 kilometers north. He stared at me like I'd spoken Mandarin. "Can you say that in miles?" he asked. I did the math in my head. "About 25 miles." He nodded, satisfied. Then his wife chimed in. "Is that walking distance?" I had to pause. 25 miles? Walking distance. I said, "Ma'am, that's like walking from here to the mountains. You'll need a car or a bus." She looked genuinely shocked. "Everything's so far apart here," she complained. I wanted to tell her that Australia is literally the size of the continental United States, but I just smiled and handed her a bus schedule. I've spent years collecting stories like this, real moments that reveal how we misunderstand each other without even realizing it. I don't chase viral trends. I decode cultural blind spots. If that kind of perspective hits different for you, you already know where you belong. Another guest at that same hostel asked me where to find the nearest Outback Steakhouse. Dead serious. I told him, "Mate, we don't really have those here. That's an American chain?" He looked betrayed. "But you're the Outback," he said, gesturing vaguely at the window. "This is false advertising." I had to explain that the Outback is a real place in Australia, not a restaurant theme. Most people laugh at stories like this. I study what they reveal, how culture shapes our default assumptions. That's the standard I hold every story to. If you value understanding people as much as judging them, this is the channel built for you. He seemed disappointed, like he'd discovered Santa wasn't real. His friend jumped in and asked if we had kangaroos hopping down the streets in the city. I told him no, that's mostly rural areas. He didn't believe me. "I've seen the videos," he insisted. I realized he'd probably watched some tourist montage and thought all of Australia was just kangaroos and didgeridoos. That same week, I met an American couple at Bondi Beach. They were standing at the edge of the water, fully clothed, looking nervous. I asked if they were going in. The husband said, "We heard about the sharks." I told him shark attacks are extremely rare. "But what about drop bears?" he asked. I started laughing, then realized he was serious. Someone had told him drop bears were real. For those who don't know, drop bears are a made-up creature Aussies invented to mess with tourists. They're supposedly killer koalas that drop from trees and attack people. Completely fake. I had to break the news to him. He looked relieved but also embarrassed. His wife wasn't convinced. "So there are no deadly animals here?" she asked. I had to gently explain that Australia does have dangerous wildlife, just not imaginary koalas. She decided to stay on the beach towel. The best part of that job was watching Americans try to order coffee. One guy asked for a regular coffee with cream. Our barista looked confused. "Do you mean a flat white? A long black?" The American got frustrated. "Just regular coffee, normal coffee." The barista handed him a long black. He took one sip and made a face like he'd been poisoned. "This is so strong," he said. "Don't you have mild coffee?" We tried to explain that Australian coffee is espresso-based, not drip filter. He ended up ordering a cappuccino, then complained it had too much foam. I realized American coffee culture and Australian coffee culture are completely different universes. My friend Jake worked at the Melbourne airport for years. He told me about an American tourist who missed his flight because he showed up at the wrong terminal. The guy insisted he was at Gate 23, like his ticket said. Jake checked the ticket. It said, Terminal 2, Gate 23. The guy was standing in Terminal 1. "But I'm at Gate 23, the man kept repeating. Jake tried to explain that gate numbers restart at each terminal. The American didn't understand. "Why would you have two Gate 23s? That's so confusing." Jake told him that's how airports work everywhere. The man missed his flight and blamed Australian airport design. Jake said it happens more often than you'd think. I was on a tram in Melbourne once, sitting across from an American couple. They were having a loud conversation about how public transport was so complicated. The woman was holding a Mikey card, staring at it like it was a Rubik's Cube. "How do we know if we paid enough?" she asked her husband. He shrugged. "Just tap it and hope for the best." A local sitting nearby leaned over and explained that the system charges based on zones. The American woman looked horrified. "So we might get fined for being in the wrong zone?" The local nodded. She spent the rest of the ride anxiously checking her phone, convinced she was going to get arrested. When they got off at the same stop as me, I heard her say, "Let's just Uber everywhere from now on." My cousin works at a bottle shop in Brisbane. An American tourist came in and asked where the beer was. My cousin pointed to the fridge section. The guy walked over, then came back looking confused. "Why is it all in the fridge?" he asked. My cousin said, "Because warm beer is disgusting." The American explained that in the States, most beer is stored at room temperature in stores. My cousin was horrified. "You drink warm beer?" The American clarified that they refrigerate it at home. "But why wouldn't the store just keep it cold?" My cousin asked. The American had no answer. He bought a six-pack of XXX and left looking thoughtful, like he'd just questioned his entire existence. I met an American at a pub in Sydney who couldn't understand why the bartender cut him off after 6 drinks. "I'm not even drunk," he protested. The bartender explained that Australian law requires them to stop serving visibly intoxicated people. The American got defensive. "In the States, they let you drink until you fall over." The bartender said, "Yeah, well, here we have responsible service of alcohol laws." The guy left grumbling about nanny state rules. His friends had to drag him out. Later, I heard him complaining outside about how Australia was too strict. Meanwhile, he could barely stand up straight. Another story from Jake at the airport. An American woman asked him where she could catch the train to Sydney from Melbourne. Jake told her there's no direct passenger train between the two cities. She looked shocked. "What do you mean? They're both major cities." Jake explained that most people fly or drive because it's over 800 kilometers. She couldn't believe it. "In Europe, you can train anywhere," she said. Jake pointed out that Australia is much bigger and less densely populated than Europe. She insisted there must be a train. Jake pulled up a map and showed her the distance. She stared at it for a long moment, then said, "Why is everything so far apart here?" Jake said, "Because the country is massive." She booked a flight, still looking upset about the lack of trains. I was at a cafe in Adelaide when an American asked the waiter if they had free refills on coffee. The waiter looked confused. "Free refills?" he repeated. The American nodded. "Yeah, like unlimited coffee." The waiter said, "No, mate, you pay per cup." The American seemed disappointed. "In America, diners give you free refills." The waiter shrugged. "Well, this isn't America." The American ordered one coffee and nursed it for an hour, looking sad. I overheard him telling his friend that Australian cafes were a rip-off. His friend pointed out that the coffee quality was way better than American diner coffee. He admitted that was true, but still seemed bothered by paying for each cup. My sister worked at a Sydney hotel. An American guest called the front desk at 11 at night, furious. "Why is everything closed?" he demanded. My sister asked what he meant. "The stores, the restaurants, everything." She explained that most places close by 9 or 10 on weeknights. He was outraged. "In New York, everything's open 24/7. My sister said, "Well, this is Sydney, not New York." He asked where he could get food. She suggested the 24-hour McDonald's or a late-night kebab shop. He hung up, clearly unimpressed. The next morning, he complained at checkout that Sydney was boring because nothing stayed open late. My sister just smiled and processed his bill. I was at a barbecue in Perth when an American exchange student showed up. The host offered him a sausage and bread. The American looked at it, confused. "Is this a hot dog?" he asked. Everyone laughed. "It's a sausage sizzle, mate," the host explained. The American took a bite and made a face. Why is the bread just folded? Where's the hot dog bun? We tried to explain that this is how Aussies do it. He seemed unconvinced. And what's this red stuff? Someone told him it was tomato sauce. You mean ketchup? He asked. No, tomato sauce, they corrected. He insisted it was the same thing. An argument broke out about whether tomato sauce and ketchup are identical. It lasted 20 minutes. The American still calls it ketchup. My friend Danny is a primary school teacher in Sydney. She had an American parent come in for a meeting, furious that her son had been sent home with a note about wearing thongs to school. Why is the school sexualizing children? The mother demanded. Danny was completely lost. Then she realized the mother thought thongs meant underwear. Danny had to explain that in Australia, thongs are flip-flops. The mother turned bright red. She apologized and left quickly. Danny said it was the most awkward parent-teacher meeting she'd ever had. Now the school uses the term flip-flops in all official communications to avoid confusion. I was working at a bookshop in Melbourne when an American customer asked where the fanny packs were. I tried not to laugh. In Australia, fanny means something very different than it does in America. I politely told him we call them bum bags here. He looked at me like I was insane. Bum bags? That sounds ridiculous. I explained that fanny is slang for female anatomy in Australia. His face went red. Oh my God, I've been saying that all week. I felt bad for him. He bought a bum bag and left, looking mortified. I later heard him outside telling his wife that Australian slang was a minefield. My brother is a tradie in Brisbane. He was working on a house renovation when the American homeowner kept calling him a construction worker. My brother corrected him. I'm a tradie, mate. The American didn't understand. What's a tradie? My brother explained it's short for tradesperson. The American said, so, a construction worker. My brother gave up. But then, the homeowner kept asking him to work on his deck. My brother asked what was wrong with it. The homeowner pointed to the wooden balcony. My brother said, oh, you mean the veranda. The American insisted it was called a deck. They went back and forth. Eventually, my brother just started calling it the wooden bit outside to avoid confusion. I was at a pub in Hobart when an American tourist tried to order a round of drinks. He walked up to the bar and said, I'll have 4 Fosters, please. The bartender gave him a look. We don't serve Fosters here, mate. The American was shocked. But that's the Australian beer. The bartender explained that Foster's is mostly marketed overseas and hardly anyone in Australia actually drinks it. The American didn't believe him. That's impossible. I've seen the commercials. The bartender offered him a Carlton draft, or a VB instead. The American reluctantly agreed, but kept muttering about false advertising. His friends made fun of him for the rest of the night. My mate Sarah is a doctor in Sydney. An American patient came in complaining about a spider bite. Sarah asked to see it. The patient showed her a tiny red mark. Sarah examined it and said it was probably just a mosquito bite. The patient insisted it was a spider. I know Australia has deadly spiders, she said. Sarah explained that while we do have dangerous spiders, most bites aren't fatal, and this didn't look like a spider bite at all. The patient wasn't convinced. She demanded antivenom. Sarah had to calmly explain that antivenom is only used for confirmed bites from specific species, and this was definitely not a spider bite. The patient left, still convinced she'd been attacked by a deadly Australian spider. Sarah said American tourists are always paranoid about wildlife. I worked at a gym in Adelaide where an American member kept complaining that we didn't have air conditioning. I told him we did. It was just set to 22 degrees Celsius. He said, "That's way too hot." I did the conversion. "That's about 72 Fahrenheit." He paused. "Oh, that's actually perfect." He'd been complaining for weeks without realizing the temperature was fine. He just didn't understand Celsius. After that, he kept asking me to convert everything. How much do I weigh in pounds? How far is the run in miles? I became his personal conversion calculator. Eventually, I just told him to download a converter app. My friend worked at a tourist info center in Cairns. An American couple came in asking about shrimp on the Barbie. She told them that Aussies actually call them prawns, not shrimp. The couple looked disappointed. "So that whole phrase is fake?" they asked. She explained it came from an old American tourism ad and isn't something Australians actually say. The couple seemed genuinely upset, like they'd been lied to. The husband asked, "So what do you actually say?" My friend thought for a moment. "We'd probably just say, having prawns for tea." The couple left, looking deflated. Later, my friend saw them at a restaurant ordering shrimp anyway. Old habits die hard. I was working at a currency exchange in Sydney when an American tourist handed me a $100 bill and asked how much Australian money he'd get. I told him the exchange rate that day was about 1.5 Australian dollars per US dollar. He'd get roughly 150 Australian dollars. He looked confused. "So your money is worth less?" I explained that yes, the Australian dollar is weaker than the US dollar. He seemed offended on our behalf. "That must be embarrassing for you guys." I told him it's just economics and doesn't really matter in daily life. He still seemed to think we should be ashamed of our exchange rate. I handed him his money, and he left, probably feeling superior about his currency. My cousin is a tour guide in Uluru. She had an American tourist ask how long it would take to drive from Uluru to Sydney. She told him it's about 2,800 kilometers and would take roughly 28 hours of straight driving. He laughed. "No, seriously, how long?" She repeated the number. He couldn't believe it. "But I want to do both in one day." She explained that Australia is enormous, and you can't just pop between landmarks like you might in Europe. He got frustrated. "Why didn't anyone tell me this?" She pointed out that it's on literally every map. He ended up changing his entire trip plan. Later, she heard him complaining to his wife about how inconvenient Australia's size was. I met an American at a pub in Darwin who was shocked that we don't tip in Australia. "So you're okay with bad service?" he asked. I explained that waitstaff get paid a living wage here, so tipping isn't expected. He didn't understand. "But how do you reward good service?" I said we just say thank you and come back. He looked skeptical. "That seems lazy." I told him most Australians think the American tipping system is bizarre and puts the burden on customers instead of employers. He got defensive. "At least we reward hard work." I pointed out that Australian servers get guaranteed wages regardless of customer mood. We agreed to disagree, but he still left a tip when he paid his bill. The bartender looked confused. My friend worked at a car rental place in Melbourne. An American customer insisted on renting a vehicle with the steering wheel on the left side. My friend explained that in Australia, we drive on the left side of the road, so the steering wheel is on the right. The customer said, "That's going to be way too confusing." My friend suggested he take time to adjust or use public transport instead. The customer reluctantly rented the car. He came back 3 hours later, looking shaken. "I almost crashed 5 times, he admitted. My friend asked if he'd considered taking it slower. "I didn't realize you guys were serious about the whole left side thing," he said. My friend just stared at him. I was at a beach in the Gold Coast when an American family set up right next to a "No Swimming Dangerous Current" sign. I walked over and pointed it out. The dad waved me off. "Those signs are just for liability," he said. I told him that people actually die in rip currents here every year. He didn't seem concerned. "We're strong swimmers." I warned them one more time, then walked away. 10 minutes later, I saw a lifeguard pulling the dad out of the water. He'd been caught in a rip. The lifeguard gave him a lecture about ignoring warning signs. The family packed up and left, looking embarrassed. The dad still muttered something about overreacting Australians as they walked away. My mate is a park ranger in Tasmania. An American hiker asked him if there were any bears in the area. My mate said no, Australia doesn't have bears. The hiker seemed suspicious. "What about grizzlies?" My mate repeated that we have no bears at all. The hiker asked about mountain lions. "No." Wolves? No. The hiker finally asked, "So what dangerous animals do you have?" My mate listed off snakes, spiders, and crocodiles up north. The hiker looked relieved. "At least there are no bears." My mate didn't understand the logic, but nodded anyway. Americans have weird priorities when it comes to wildlife. I worked at a post office in Brisbane. An American customer wanted to mail a package back to the States. I weighed it and told him the cost. He asked why it was so expensive. I explained that international shipping from Australia is pricey because we're so far from everywhere. He argued that it shouldn't cost more just because of distance. I tried to explain how shipping logistics work. He insisted that shipping should be a flat rate worldwide. I told him that's not how any postal service works. He paid, but kept grumbling about how unfair it was that Australia is so isolated. I wanted to tell him that geography isn't a conspiracy, but I just processed his package. My sister's boyfriend is American and visited for the first time last year. He was amazed that we have winter in July. I explained that Australia is in the southern hemisphere, so our seasons are opposite. He knew that intellectually, but hadn't really processed it. "So you have Christmas in summer?" he asked. I said yes. Lots of people have barbecues on the beach for Christmas. He looked horrified. "That's wrong. Christmas should be cold." I told him that's just a northern hemisphere tradition. He spent his whole trip being mildly disturbed by summer Christmas. He still sends my sister photos of snow every December, with captions like "real Christmas weather." I was back at that Sydney hostel a few months later when a new American guest checked in. She asked me, very seriously, if we had McDonald's in Australia. I told her yes, we have McDonald's everywhere. She looked relieved. "Thank God. I wasn't sure if you had normal food here." I asked what she meant by normal. She said, "You know, American food." I had to break it to her that Australian cuisine is its own thing. But yes, we have international chains too. She seemed only partially convinced. Later that day, I saw her at a local cafe, nervously studying the menu like it was written in code. She eventually ordered smashed avocado on toast. When it arrived, she took a photo and posted it online with the caption, "Trying weird Australian breakfast food." I had to laugh. Smashed avo probably came from Australia in the first place. The thing about these stories is, they never stop coming. Every week at that hostel, I'd meet Americans who were shocked by something completely normal to us. The metric system, roundabouts, the word arvo instead of afternoon, how we say capsicum instead of bell pepper. It wasn't that they were trying to be difficult. They genuinely didn't realize how different things could be. And to be fair, I'm sure Australians make the same mistakes when we visit America. We probably ask dumb questions about why everything's so cheap and why the portions are enormous. But there's something funny about watching someone realize their normal isn't everyone's normal. That moment when an American figures out that the rest of the world doesn't use Fahrenheit, or that other countries have perfectly functional systems that don't involve tipping, or that coffee can actually taste good instead of being brown water from a drip machine. It's not about making fun of anyone. It's just interesting to see those cultural gaps play out in real time. My favorite interactions were always the ones where the American was genuinely curious and wanted to learn. Those people would ask why we do things differently and actually listen to the answer. They'd try Vegemite, even though it tasted weird to them. They'd attempt to say "g'day" without sounding ridiculous. They'd laugh at themselves when they messed up. Those were the ones who ended up loving Australia and coming back. The ones who struggled were the ones who expected Australia to be just like home, but with kangaroos. They'd get frustrated when things didn't match their expectations and blame us for being different. They'd complain instead of adapting. And honestly, those people probably shouldn't travel, because the whole point of going somewhere new is experiencing something unfamiliar. That's exactly what this channel exists for. Decoding those quiet collisions between cultures that show us who we really are. Most creators react, I research. So if expanding how you see the world is your thing, subscribing isn't a favor. It's a commitment to perspective. I don't work at that hostel anymore, but I still hear stories from friends who do. Americans asking if they need malaria pills for Sydney. Americans trying to swim with crocodiles because they saw it in a movie. Americans shocked that we use the word thong for footwear. These stories never end. And honestly, I hope they never do, because they remind me that the world is weird and wonderful, and we're all just trying to figure it out as we go, even if some of us are more confused than others.